Hey everyone, Luke McElroy from Mets Performance Consulting. You're watching this video today because you're interested in or at least intrigued by a Vo2 Max test and what it is. So one question that I get from a lot of guys is I find that people don't actually know what a Vo2 Max test is, why you should do it or how it can benefit you. So this short video is all going to be about exactly what the test is, what it entails, how it's going to benefit you as an endurance athlete and why it's the best test that any endurance athlete who's completing a continuous sport can do, and how that's going to help you achieve your goals. So basically, first of all, what the Vo2 Max test involves is you can do it on a treadmill, bike or rower, and we start off at a low intensity, and every minute or 3 minutes, depending on the sort of test you're doing, but every 1 to 3 minutes we increase that intensity ever so slightly. The idea is that we keep ramping it up until eventually you reach your maximum or hit exhaustion and you can't continue to go any longer. During the test, you're hooked up to a mask, and in that mask you can breathe through your mouth and your nose. It's actually quite comfortable. What that's measuring is your ventilation, so how much air you're breathing in, the oxygen that you're extracting out of that air, your breathing rate, your heart rate, your lactate if you choose to do lactate with it, your power or your pace depending on what exercise test you're doing, and we plot all that data against each other as well. So we get lots and lots of data, which I can then use to get your individualized training zones. Now, I'm going to jump over to the computer in a sec and show you exactly how I measure those individualized training zones and also how I identify your physiological strengths and weaknesses and how we can then use that information to give you specific training advice to really target in on those weaknesses and see 10, 15, even 20% improvements in as little as 3 months instead of chasing the 1, 2 or 3% improvements that most people do. So we'll jump over to the computer now and we'll show you that. All right, and we're back. So when we finish the Vo2 Max test, this is the Excel spreadsheet that we get, and we get so much data from this, all right? So I'll quickly run through what we get and then how we use this to identify your training zones and strengths and weaknesses. So on the left here we have time, averaged over 30 seconds. Then we've got ventilation, so this is how much air that our lungs are breathing in and out every minute. RF is our respiratory flow, or how many breaths per minute that we're taking. Heart rate here, fraction of expired oxygen. So this is telling us out of the air that we have available, so out of the oxygen we have available, this is telling us exactly how much oxygen our muscles are using compared to how much that we're breathing out and not using. So this is a really key one for our strengths and weaknesses, which I'll show you in a sec. Your VO2 in power to weight ratio here. Your load, this one was for this example data was for a cyclist, so we use load for this one. If you do the running test, you'll get your pace. Speed, obviously don't have that for the bike test, gradient, etc. And a whole lot of graphs plotting against each other here as well. So let's go into how we do the training zone. So at Mets, we prescribe 5 training zones, and these 5 training zones have a specific purpose. First one is the active recovery zone. Right? So the active recovery zone is 56% of your VO2 max and below, and that's because that's what the American College of Sports Medicine has researched it to be. Basically, the goal of the active recovery zone is literally just to flush out lactic acid and recover quicker. We're not even trying to get any performance benefits from that. So the way that we figure out your active recovery zone is we go down to what your VO2 max is in mils per minute. So we got here 3242, so just over 3,000 litres. We do 3,242, find out what 56% of that is, which is 1,815. We then jump over to this graph here, which plots heart rate against VO2. Use this equation, plug it in. So plus 1493.9 divided by 26.125, and we get a heart rate of 126.6, round that up to 127. So for this individual, a heart rate of 127 and below is their active recovery zone. The next zone is from that 56%, so from 127 up until the point just before they begin producing lactic acid, all right? So this is lactic acid here. Now, resting lactate is generally between 1 to 2 millimoles, all right? So we can see here that it starts out at 1.1, even goes down because this individual was cruising along and we're actually metabolizing that lactic acid at this point, back up to 1.1 to 1.8, and then you see at 180 watts, we're at 2.6 at a heart rate of 153. So we are now beyond that next zone. So we are beyond the endurance zone because the endurance zone is from 56% up until the final point before we start producing lactic acid above resting, and we know that 2 is resting. So as you see, lactate 1.8, still considered resting, heart rate 139, so heart rate of 139 is the top end there. We can also check this against ventilation data. The first point at which we get a non-linear increase. So if this is straight across, as it is here, you see from this point here, it is now starting to go up. So that 12-minute mark, I would expect to be the same point for that 130 odd. There you go, 12 minutes here, heart rate 138. It is 139. It's pretty much bang on. So that's how we can really hone in on that exact heart rate. Next zone is your threshold zone. So your threshold zone is from when we are producing lactic acid above resting up until the point at which lactic acid entry equals removal. Now for this individual, it's not as clear cut as some are. It's actually in between this point here, okay? So we're looking at the point at lactic acid entry equaling removal. So we are here. Now, because it doesn't show us exactly on this graph, again, we come back over and we plot it against this graph. So we go straight line up here. I am doing it by eye, so apologies for that. And that is going to be the point there, 1730. Go back, 1730, heart rate 165, load 210. Perfect. There we go. So we've got the heart rate there. Next zone is the Vo2 Max zone. So it's from that point, end of threshold, up until 100% Vo2 Max. 100% Vo2 Max up here is a heart rate of 178 at, it says 270 watts, but we only just finished the 240 watt stage. So we'd go in between and go 250 watts for that. Beyond that, we've got our anaerobic zone. So anaerobic zone is literally just above 100% Vo2 max. So that's how we get those zones, and this is what we see here. Okay, this is an example of the summary report we get. You've got your summary results, your Vo2 max, and your anaerobic threshold. Anaerobic threshold is what you can hold for 45 to 60 minutes. We'll have a strengths and areas for improvement section and also a notes and recommendations. So in that notes and recommendations section, I will give you training advice, exactly what sort of zone you need to hit, for how long, for how many intervals, etc., to actually target those weaknesses and get those 10, 15, 20% gains. These are the zones. Active recovery, as I said, 127 below, 127 to 139, 140 to 158, 159 to 178. Also, it relates it to power here, or pace if you're doing the run, and perceived effort. There's also a description of the training zones, and I'll send you a link to a video which explains the ins and outs of that, of each training zone as well. So heaps and heaps of stuff, as well as a glossary of terms, so you can have a look at the data. I send you all the data that we're looking at, every graph you get, because I want you to have access to the best data possible to reach your goals. So that's how we do the training zones. Now, going over to the physiological strengths and weaknesses. Now, basically there's two ways we can get fitter. One is to improve our VO2 max. The other is to improve our functional threshold. Right? So your VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen that you can take in, transport, and utilize in 1 minute. So it's the efficiency of your heart, your lungs, and your muscles working together to fuel aerobic performance. So your VO2 max is determined by how much air you can breathe in, ventilation, how much oxygen you're extracting out of that air, which is that fraction of expired oxygen here, and also your heart rate, how many times per beat, how much blood you can circulate per minute. So what we can do is, we can come have a look at the fraction of expired oxygen graph. All right, so this is telling me how efficient this person's muscles are at actually extracting oxygen. And I can tell you, based on scientific literature and also having hundreds and hundreds of people come through the door, that between 16 and 16.2%, which is where my mouse is at the moment, that's about the average, right? We actually want this to be as low as possible, because lower means we're breathing less oxygen out, therefore our muscles have used more of it inside, all right? So we want this to be as close, as far down as possible. The elite guys are around 14 to 13.5%, all right? So 16 to 16.2% is average, 15.5 is good, 15 is great, 14.5 and below is excellent, 14 below is well and truly elite. So this person is actually in the good to excellent range. They're well above the average here by getting close to 15%. So their VO2 max, or their muscles' ability to extract oxygen, is a strength of theirs. And as such, they can still target this area, but they're not going to see massive gains. So it's already well above the average. Okay? So I'd say for this person, VO2 max, tick. That's not where we need to focus. We can also have a look at this graph here, and this is showing us how much oxygen this person's heart is ejecting per beat. All right. So, and I can tell you confidentially, this is a female, so anywhere about 18 to 20 mils, which is where we're at the top, that's pretty good. So heart's no issue as well. Plenty of oxygen getting circulated per heartbeat. So that says, well, where can this person improve? And when you see someone with such a good fraction of expired oxygen, such a good ability to extract oxygen from their blood, generally it's their threshold where they can improve. All right. So what your threshold is how much of your VO2 max that you can functionally use for 45 to 60 minutes. So nobody can hold 100% VO2 max for very long. It's just not physiologically possible. You can do it for a couple of minutes, but that's it. Most people watching this, you're probably, a little bit longer than a couple of minutes. You're probably swimming or doing Ironman or triathlon or marathon running, half marathon running, anything over about 5 minutes, you're going to need to know what your functional threshold is. All right. So the average individual, they can hold 70% of their VO2 max at their functional threshold. So that means if their VO2 max is 60, they can hold 70% of that 60 for a long time. The elite guys, they can tap into a larger proportion of it. They can hold 88 to 94% of their VO2 max, okay? So they're using a whole lot of their VO2 max. They can tap into that for a long time. You see here, their anaerobic threshold was at 16 minutes, and that is at 81% of their VO2 max, all right? So 70% average, 88 to 94% is elite, 81%, so we're smack bang in the middle for this individual. Now, 81% for a fit person, to say it's although it's above average, muscle's ability to extract oxygen was excellent. Threshold is above average, but we really want to push that up to the good and excellent category as well. So we know that doing your threshold zone training and your anaerobic interval training, that is going to improve that threshold. That's going to get that 81% that we've got here and push that up to 88 to 94% like the elites are, okay? So this is the sort of information that you can get from doing a VO2 max test. We can figure out what your threshold is and whether it's average, good, poor, elite, etc. We can figure out what your VO2 max is and also see how much percentage of improvement we can get from that. It may already be very good. Often, and I'd say most of the time, this fraction of expired oxygen is 17%, which is well below average, and we can easily get 10, 15, 20% gains through just doing 2 to 3 months of endurance zone work and VO2 max work. All right? So the zones we get help to target these specific areas, and the areas that you should train in are determined by figuring out which areas are good and which areas are a weakness of yours. So that's a little bit about what this test does and why it's important. Basically, we can cut down from doing 20 hours a week of training to potentially doing 6 hours a week of training, but still get more benefit than doing 20 hours because we're hitting the exact targets and we're literally honing in specifically on trying to improve those weaknesses. Right? Most people are chasing 1 or 2% of gains. They're doing the same training. They don't vary it up. They're actually targeting the same physiological weakness or physiological area. Okay? If we can, though, shift that to what they truly need to do and hone in on that zone and that physiological weakness, you see massive improvements. Literally, I've had 100% success rate with identifying this and getting people on their way. So if you want to get fitter and get, improve your performance by actually doing less work and just training smarter, not harder, then this test is right for you. I'll quickly jump back onto the camera and wrap it up with what I recommend for you guys. See you in a sec. Alright guys, so that's the ins and outs of what a VO2 max test involves and how we can get that data and use that to improve your performance. So basically this is a perfect test for anybody who undertakes a continuous sport, whether that be swimming, cycling, triathlon, running, rowing. I get a lot of army guys coming through who are trying to get fit for their fitness testing. Anything like that, this test will give you all the information you need to know to really tailor that program and get the best out of your body. Alright? So just looking at that alone, taking you through that whole process, you can understand why some places are charging $300 plus for this service. And they don't even take you through recommendations or how you can use their zones or your zones to improve your performance. So we go one up on that. We're all about education. You come in, you do the test, I educate you on exactly what you need to do to improve your performance and reach your goals, all right? If you want to do a training program or coaching or a consultation, you can do that. That's up to you. But the most important thing is step number 1 is book a VO2 max test, get that data, then we can decide whether you need a program or whether you can just go off and just tweak a few things in your current program to get the best out of yourself. In terms of whether you should do lactate analysis or not, I would recommend that if you can fork out the extra $30, I would do it. The $30 literally only covers the cost of the strips. I don't benefit financially either way. So we're just covering the strips. As you saw, the lactate graph is good to have. It is a direct measurement of when that anaerobic contribution is coming in or when that lactic acid is coming in, whereas the respiration or the respiratory values is just an indirect measure. So I would recommend it, not crucial, but definitely if you've got a power meter or if you run by pace on your watch, I would definitely get that as well. So any questions, shoot me an email, luke@metsperformance.com. More than happy to have a chat. But as I said, step number 1, get in for a Vo2 Max test.